Scottish omens of death. Many ancient families of Scotland have inhabited the castles and stately homes where they have lived, married, and died. Several tragic stories surround some of these families and residences, from illness and death to hauntings and omens. In the middle of the rolling countryside of Angus resides one of the most ancient families, the Ogilvies, who inhabited the castles of Courtkey and Airlie, and are plagued by the ghostly presence of a drummer who plays his drum as a portent of a death in the family. While a visitor was staying at Courtkey in 1845, she was dressing for dinner when she heard a loud drum beat under her window. When she inquired about this at dinner, the Earl turned pale, the Countess became very upset, and the rest of the guests seemed extremely embarrassed. Later, she was informed that the last time the drummer was heard was before the last Countess's death, and it was a very unpleasant subject in the household. The next morning, the maid had a terrifying encounter with the drummer. The drumming followed her as she fled through the house and only stopped when it was directly outside her room. She left the castle the very next day. Shortly after these encounters, the Countess of Airlie died at Brighton, and she had written among her papers that she was sure the drumming sounded for her. In 1849, the drummer was heard before the death of the 7th Earl by a young Englishman on a hunting trip up Glen Isla. On his return to the lodge, he found Lord Ogilvy had left to see his seriously ill father in London. The Earl of Airlie died the next day. Also, in 1881, the drummer was heard by 2 guests one evening. 2 days later, the death of the 8th Earl of Airlie was reported in the newspaper. It was later calculated that the drums were heard in the house the hour before he died. There are many stories about the origins of the drummer. One account said that it is the ghost of a drummer who tried to have an affair with a former earl's wife. Others say it is of a drummer who brought a message to the earl from a rival, which enraged him. In both reports it is said the earl thrust the man into his own drum and threw him from the ramparts of the castle in a violent rage. Another account states it is the drummer which, when an enemy advanced upon the castle Airlie, the drummer sounded the alarm from the tower and continued to drum out a warning as the army set light to the castle and the flames licked higher and he was burned to death. The drums were heard again in 1884 and 1900, but seems to have gone quiet since then. Time will only tell if the ghost has been laid to rest, or if it is simply waiting to predict the doom of another of the Ogilvy family.